Hello, Culture Matters podcast. You're in for a treat today. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote. Solving the same problem over and over again is fine. The really great people find interest and excitement solving different types of problems, applying different skill sets, constantly learning and figuring out how to solve a problem. Second thing is they ask really great questions. The best consultants that I've worked with are really keen to define the problem they're trying to solve and understand it before they try to solve it. The lesser consultants give you an answer before they fully understand the question. Juan Pablo Gonzalez, you're all in for a treat today. I was re-listening to the last episode of one of the last episodes of the Culture Matters podcast, episode 826. If you haven't listened to it and you're listening, go over there after this episode. Our guest today is yours truly, Juan Pablo Gonzalez, over 30 years in business, in consulting, in consulting consultants, advisor of the advisors, worked with companies like Philip Morris, the Constellation Energy, to very specific professional service firms like Korn Ferry and Axiom Consulting Partners, Mercer HR Consulting, and the like. Currently, a senior partner at Kinavic Leadership Acceleration, which is a company that focuses specifically on helping professional service firms accelerate their leadership. We're going to get into the nuances and details of that. That's consulting, that's legal, that's accounting. And Juan Pablo, if you haven't listened to that last episode, has a great, rich background in leadership and culture and organizational understanding. So thanks for coming back to the show. I love that quote. I was going to use Bane, but I thought, his birthday was the other day. He's a
Mm.
great guy. I'm sure. I wish I had met him, but I like that quote a lot that you said on the last show. So thanks for coming back.
Jay, thanks so much. And it was funny. I was smiling when you read the quote. I'm thinking, wow, I really agree with this guy. Like
It
I would have
helped
said
me. It
it.
impacted me last time we got together. So I really loved it. I am curious, was for those that are listening that are okay, they're in professional services at some level, the accountants, the lawyers, the consultants, those in the helping profession. When in your career did you grasp that concept that it was backwards, the inquiry versus the statement? Was it early on? Was it middle? Was it towards the end? Was it like the stock market, up and down volatility?
hmm
Because it's that's such a tangible, soft skill. I'm doing the air quotes that I think our listeners of all walks could benefit
Yeah, I think the idea of defining the problem you're trying to solve is a bedrock of consulting, right? Whether people express it that way or not, better consultants. And I think I probably some of the first consultant I worked with was a long time ago. I think I was at Philip Morris. This is in the 1980s, and we were working with was an executive pay consultant. And he who described himself, I always remember the phrase, he said, I'm an itinerant vendor of truth. I'm like, what does that mean? Well, I'm like, right. I'm like, oh, what does that mean?
That's
Shows up
awesome.
with his briefcase, got a lot of facts, but what he was really, really good at was asking questions. He didn't work in our business. He knew our industry, but he would ask, and I was a junior guy. He'd ask me a lot of questions. He'd ask my boss a lot of questions. We'd interview executives. He's constantly asking questions. So I'd say, Doug, what are you doing? I'm just trying to understand so I can be helpful. And that, by the way, is the profession. We're trying to understand so we can be helpful. Consultants and advisors bring expertise, but it's not particularly useful unless they understand what the client's issues are, what the problem is they're trying to solve, why they called an advisor a consultant in the first place. Because if they didn't need the help, they wouldn't have made the call. So what is it about this issue? Describe the challenge. Why is it a problem? What are the implications of this problem? What would happen if you address it and fix things? What if you don't? Right? What caused it? What do you think caused it? What if you made other changes? This is starts to feel a bit like a deposition, but really the early stages of a good engagement are understanding the client's situation. Right? You can't help if you don't understand.
from the practiced a steward of that process, were there exercises or um, habits that, or anything that you were shown through behavior or even through training that helped, that you would share with our audience that could help slow one down to be able to ask those questions? Or like how do you actually slow down to speed up in that fashion?
Well, so I was very fortunate to work with some just incredible advisors, great mentors to me. A lot of it was just watching. It's the apprenticeship model, watching what they did and how they did it. And it's not to mimic what they do. You're not trying to come out and be and just parrot the question. But what I remember about, one particular guy that really started me in consulting is how authentic he was and how he went about it. There are things you do on his own. I do try to copy that, and that he come in very well prepared. So there's no substitute for research. You shouldn't be asking a question that is otherwise knowable. That's lazy. Read the news, do the research, go to the website. You should understand what industries the company's in. You should understand what countries the client's in. You should understand if they've been in the paper recently, do they have an earnings release, did they have a leadership change. Those things are not questions to ask. That's research to do. The questions to ask have to do with the implications. So Jay, I noticed that you just made an investment and purchased a new firm. You bought a firm in Kansas City. You're based in Chicago. I know you invested, I don't know, $50 million in this new firm in Kansas City. Tell me about that. Tell me about your thinking. Why did you buy it? Was it market expansion? Oh no, actually, we made that investment because they bring certain capabilities that we didn't have, or because we think it's a market where we can be very successful, or I got a good price. Like it doesn't really. The answer is less important. Understanding it is very important because that sets you up to help them. If you bought this fictitious firm in Kansas City because you wanted to acquire a new capability, that has implications for your firm, right? What do other people need to learn about that capability? How will you bring that capability to market? What do your business developers who are used to selling A need to understand so that they can help bring B to market? Is there an opportunity for them to bring their capabilities from Chicago into Kansas City? All these sorts of things.
Mm,
So it's the layering of the questions. I'd say the other thing about this is, it helps to be naturally inquisitive. There are people in this profession who are not. It's unfortunate. They're capable, but consultants get a bad rap sometimes. They're just going to come in and tell you what to do based on what they did at the last firm. I don't think that's really consulting, to be honest with you. It's just telling people what to do, and there's a difference.
does that have a place in any context within the scope? Like in does that have any place in your experience
Well, your
where it can be
expertise is,
valuable?
yeah, expertise is why you're hired. So you need to know what to do. You need to have experience in pursuing different courses of action. The difference is deciding what the issue. So here's an analogy. So think of medicine, right? So the physician could be a cardiologist. They could be an orthopedist. They've got their specialty, but you don't know what you need until you go in and your general practitioner checks you out. You've got to figure out what the problem is before you treat. Otherwise, the old saying is, what is that? Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice, right? You have to understand
Wow.
first.
Prescription. Mm. You mentioned something. So over 18,000 professionals over at least a decade and a half in within the context of the consulting, the professional services vertical. You have data that led to the Verity tool.
Oh yeah,
Is that
absolutely. So
correct? So where does that play in this under, because that's what I was thinking. Where could that be valuable when it relates to some people just aren't inquisitive?
okay, so
How can that be help so a tool?
th-
Yeah, how do you what do you
yeah,
think
so
about that? I don't-
thanks for bringing that up, Jay. So Verity, which is a proprietary psychometric tool, is based on 18,000 cases of data. Now these are the top 20% of a much larger sample of professional
Wow.
services partners. So what we did is we studied the most successful people and said in simple terms, we know what good looks like. We know what the traits and attributes and psychometric profiles are of people who are successful partners in professional services firms. So there are a number of applications. If you were recruiting for someone, so selecting for them, you would assess the candidate, compare them, and look at the gaps. And if there are no gaps, well, you've got a great fit, go ahead, hire the person. If there are some gaps, and most people aren't, no one fits it exactly. There are going to be some strengths, going to be some gaps. And so what you do in that case, and the advice that we have is, well, proceed with caution, understand the person that you're getting here, what strengths they have to be leveraged, but what important gaps you're going to need to work on to close. Sometimes you run across people who are just too far off the spec. And the conversation we have with our clients is, listen, you could hire the person, but here's where they're going to struggle. Here are where the challenges are going to be. And so if you're not prepared to onboard them a certain way, put them in certain engagements, help them close those gaps, they may not succeed. And every now and then we run across somebody who's just like in the wrong place. Like this is unlikely to work. Obviously, we can't tell you what to do or not to do, but we would advise not to hire the person for that reason. Now, what's particularly interesting about this, because you're looking at people, they're all very different. They've gone through, typically by the time we start talking to them, they've been through a typical recruiting process, right? You've interviewed for jobs, I've interviewed for jobs. There's a resume or LinkedIn, there are interviews and questions and reference checks, and where this is all going is what most companies do is they've got a really good handle on what we would refer to as visible factors. The stuff I can see. I know where you've worked. You've shown me your sales results. You've led organizations of this size. You've got these patents, whatever it is that you're looking for, it's all visible. Oh, and by the way, you're referred by a friend who says you're a really good professional. So all the visible stuff is there. What we don't know is what's going on inside of you and how that's going to work in your environment, because you've been very successful somewhere else. That's terrific. We don't know if you're going to succeed in our role. We hope you do, because you've hit your sales numbers, because you've got good executive presence, because of a track record of A, B, and C. But I see this all the time actually in the big four. You think of the big four consulting and accounting firms, so Deloitte, EY, KPMG, and PwC. People refer to them as one. Oh, it's a big four, a big four partner, big four partner. I can tell you, having been a partner in one of the big four, the cultures are dramatically different. I'm looking at your t-shirt, right? The culture, they may do very similar work, but what it takes to succeed in one is not exactly what it takes to succeed in the other. Even if you're a technical expert, even if you're a forensic accountant, even if you are an expert in cybersecurity, all that's on the resume, all that's visible. But the challenges you will face and the opportunities you'll be able to seize have more to do with who you are as a person than your resume.
What relationship does understanding who the associate or the partner, the leader is as a person and their ability to move up the career path as the third party firm? So you're the advisor of the advisor. You're helping them move up their career. Is that correct? Which helps the client, which is the
Well,
organization
the
that needs
client's
to.
typically the firm. And so we're
Okay.
helping them to identify and select people that will be successful. And then we're helping the people, once they're hired, achieve success more quickly.
Mm.
So a way to think about this would be, you just started in this new role. You are an expert in cybersecurity at a partner level. You join this firm, and I've said this before. You get your laptop, you get a call list, and off you go. That's what most firms do. It's not particularly successful. Some people are able to make it work, but for most people, getting a customized head start is much more valuable. So what I would do if you had just joined my firm as a partner in cyber, I'd say, let's look at your profile. And it says here, Jay, that you are particularly good in the marketplace. You create relationships well, you create deep relationships, you expand services, um, and you're very much externally focused. And you've just joined my firm. My firm is an enormous firm. My firm has hundreds of thousands of employees around the world and does business with everybody they want to anyway. So my advice, and again, if I knew your profile, I'd say, well, so your ability to make a market's terrific. We don't make a market that way. What we do is we will take your cyber capabilities to market through existing accounts. So my
Mm,
plan for you would have more to do with how do I build your internal network? How do I demonstrate your expertise in cybersecurity, right? Because one thing we know about partners, partners know when they're succeeding, when they're failing. They hate failing. So we want to show you some early successes, put you on an account or two where you can demonstrate how great you are at what you do. That's going to build your reputation. People are going to want to work with you. And then let's make it a priority to help build your internal network. This is just one example, but this is none of that's on the resume. The resume just says you're a really good partner and you know cyber. So figuring out how you're built and where you're most successful allows us to build a plan to get you up to speed quickly. And we're talking, let's just spend the first 6 months getting you, sort of slingshotting you into success as opposed to waiting to see if it
mm.
happens. Because we wait and see if it happens and it doesn't, it's hard to turn things around after a while.
Are, are there market and or cultural uh, variables happening right now in the marketplace that are making what Kinavic Leadership Acceleration does even more vital and more important?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some major changes taking place in professional services right now. The ones that come to mind certainly, no, you can't be on a podcast and not say AI, right? So,
Yeah.
what's happening in AI with AI is most of what's written is about the junior associates work being replaced with technology. And, sadly, a lot of that's happening. Well, the bump on effect is the leaders and partners in the firm, partners in different engagements, how they need to understand how to leverage technology and how to leverage humans and put that together in the new whatever the new way of doing things is, because it's happening in real time. You're not turning the whole project over to an AI
It's
agent. You're not just plugging it in, but figuring out how to use that technology, understanding, again, back to asking questions, understanding what the client needs, what they're comfortable with, what doesn't, some clients have an issue with using certain technologies. So the partner still has to do a fair amount of diagnostics and then figure out how to deploy a team that leverages the best of the human mind and the best of technology. So
mm,
that's one major change. The other major change we're seeing is the tremendous interest that private equity investors have in professional services firms. Uh, we've seen a lot of it in mid-sized accounting firms, middle market accounting firms. Um, you just do a quick search, you'll see like every week or two, a private equity firm makes an investment in a CPA firm. They like it. They like the CPA firms because generally speaking, they have stable recurring revenue. Generally speaking, they are limited in their growth because of their capital structure, their partnerships. So a mid-sized firm might have 50 partners. That's where you go to for money. So if you and I are partners in a 50-person firm and we want to grow, we either pass the hat or take out a loan. And we're not interested in doing either of those things because we're partners in this firm and we're closer to retirement than we are at the beginning of our careers. So the firms need money, and private equity likes the stability of earnings. Now, what happens then is back to the change in the industry. Private equity will make the investment. Now the job starts to change for the partner and the firm, right? Because the private equity firm isn't investing the money just to get the cash flow. They have a value creation plan. They expect to grow this firm very quickly. They're either going to grow it through acquisition, quite commonly, or through hiring of direct admit partners. They're basically looking for more of a revenue engine. Occasionally, they look at what is more of an efficiency play. They say, well, you know what, this firm, the Jay and Juan firm, hasn't been able to invest in the technology they need to keep up. So we're going to make an investment in technology that's going to help them be more efficient and more profitable. But long story short, those jobs are changing. Think of the scenario, the job of the partner is changing dramatically. You've got either an influx of new technology, you're being combined with other firms, or if nothing else, you're being asked to produce a lot more than you used to produce, right? If I invest a bunch of money in your firm, I'm not going to be satisfied with the partners delivering the same level of growth they have year after year. They're growing 8%. I want 12, I want 15. You have to do something different.
how much of the growth of firms of past had a relationship with that mentor-mentee dichotomy? I learned from last time you were on the show. We were out of the office, but we were on the road and we were
Mm.
together and we're communicating. There's value exchange. So my curiosity would be that growth. How much of that growth could have had with that relationship between partner and associate, mentor mentee,
Yeah.
if that's being disintermediated.
I think there's
So,
great concern about the future of apprenticeship, and it's unfortunate. I mean, you could say it's a bit old fashioned, learning, carrying the bag, as it were. I did actually carry somebody else's bag, uh, but that there's less opportunity for it because of remote work and also because of what I was saying before about junior level staff work being more rapidly replaced through technology. So the question then becomes where does the next generation of managers, of senior managers, and ultimately of partners, where do they come from? Who's going to teach them, and how are they going to learn?
mm,
That's something people are deeply concerned about. It's not a today problem, but it's very much a not too far in the future problem.
mm. There's a quote, Bill Bain. Uh, it's 1% vision and 99% alignment. What's your
Mhm.
take on that quote? Why,
Yeah.
if I'm saying that correctly,
Yeah, I
what's
think
he
he
getting
would
at
say
in
that, yeah,
that?
performance is 1% vision and 99% alignment, right? So
Uh-huh.
the point, I think, and I never met Bill Bain, but I think that the point was, you know, it's a lot of leadership books are written about, the visionary leader, and I know where we're going, and I'm gonna get people excited about it. And getting people excited about it is where it kicks in. You can have a great idea, but if you're not able to align your firm and your talent to execute on that idea, you're not going to get too far. This is a actually actually this is a great quote from John Boehner, the former Speaker of the House. He said, "A leader without followers is just a guy taking a walk." And there's a so you can have a vision, but aligning your organization, your team to that vision is important. I'll take it a step further, which is maybe not exactly what Bill Bain meant, but I think it's important. Aligning your capabilities with your vision for success or what you're asked to do. So back to that example, if my job is to commercialize a product, or if my job is to open a market for my firm, um, aligning my skills is going to be really critical. Understanding where my strengths are, what I can do to achieve those objectives, what capabilities I can rely on, and knowing where I'm going to struggle, we're going to have challenges, and doing something about that in advance. So aligning and saying, well, there's a particular aspect of this which is in the I don't know, maybe it's in the commercialization of the idea that where I don't have that talent. It's not my natural way of doing things. I'm going to need help. Jay, I'm going to need you on my team to help me to do this. And so then we're now aligning our talents and our capabilities to meet that objective, to meet that vision of success.
When you said that quote, leader without followers just taking a walk, it made me think, like, as a metaphor for this scenario where you have partner, associate, private capital coming in. If the associate's less likely to do the work because of the technological,
Hmm.
let's say, putting them to the side, that's a more onus on partner to do. But if they were in a spirit of not necessarily doing, but communicating through title and words and the
Hmm.
relationship of the associate, there's an absent of the associate. So then there's what? More onus on them to do. But if they're not used to doing, that creates a lot of conflict, I would think, or
Yeah.
anxiety, or an opportunity for an
Mm.
accelerating for a third party. I would care if you could. I'm not quite. I don't have it, but
Mm.
that quote
Yeah.
right there, the company, the partners are going along. You're helping. They're going along for the walk, and you're coming alongside the followers that are starting to like stray in different directions, and you're coming alongside them and walking behind the partners and then with them,
Yeah,
helping them get back in
I guess
line, right?
I might turn it a quarter to the quarter
Yeah,
turn and
please.
say, so there are two things going on. One, the role of the partner is very much changing. So partners are doing more. The sort of the archetype of the partner who's been in the business for ages and just shows up and buys lunch, that doesn't work anymore. That does not work anymore, but you are required to work. You may not be running spreadsheets in your, late 50s, early 60s, but you are required to leverage what you know, whether what you know is an industry, whether what you know is really understanding the executive suite, which is, by the way, where a lot of partners excel, is just through repetition, being able to read the room, being able to understand which questions to ask, when to ask them, who to ask them of, and help an organization, advance. So that's real work, right? It's not, it doesn't involve, flipping open your laptop, but I think the role of the partner is changing. They're going to be required, and they are being required to spend more time with their clients. I'm seeing this in some of the big firms that are actually converting partners back into managing directors because they want them billing more time. It's not that they need to record, they're not looking just to record more hours. They want the partners on site working directly with the client instead of leveraging it to somebody else. That's a change that's taking place for sure. We see that a lot in the bigger firms that are running what they call operate businesses. So they're managed services organizations. Their senior leaders are actually running IT for another company. You and I might have a company and say, we need an offshore data center. We'll hire a firm to run the data center for us. And so then the people in that data center, they may be partners in a consulting firm and associates in a consulting firm, but their everyday job looks more like working in a data center, right? There's that shift. I would say relative to helping people come along, as you're pointing out, I think it's really important to be clear. Is the 1% vision is really important. Where are we going and why are we going there? What are we doing? How are we going to do it? Why is it important? That is critical. No, it's hard. You can't align with something you don't understand, right? So that's the job of leadership, to be very clear. What we're able to do is help them to clarify the messages, understand their audience, and help them prepare. Now, the rest of it is selecting people who are likely to succeed in the work that they've been asked to do. So it's sort of it's a two-parter, right? You got to know where you're going, then you got to know how to get there.
What do you see as the relationship between the consulting firm and private equity firm? Private equity firm deploying capital into business, consulting firm accountability mechanism for business. Is is there synergy? Or if so, what is it in your
Yeah.
estimation? How do they or don't they complement one another?
There's opportunities, what I would say there is. There may not be synergy just yet. Now, I was speaking with a very impressive private equity investor yesterday, and he was on board with this. And here's what tends to happen, by the way. So there's an opportunity to invest. Private equity is looking very closely at firms of many sizes. I mean, geez, Bain bought Guidehouse, I think, at $1 billion, no, it was like a $4 billion valuation. So there are big deals taking place, right? So there's an opportunity for capital, and there's an opportunity to deploy that capital. That's the relationship between the firm and the investor. And the investor wants returns. The investor is not going to come in and run the company. So the opportunity is, and this is sort of on the vision thing. Their vision is double the size. Their vision is, go from 10% growth to 20% growth. Their vision is, increase the valuation from 400 million to $2.5 billion in 2 years. I get my money out. That's the vision of the investor. They don't need to be, frankly, bogged down in the work of the firm. Now, the work of the firm is, okay, they made a big investment. How exactly are we going to get from 400 million to 2 billion? Right. And that's actually where we come in. Those are the sort of the hard yards to say, well, now let's look at your strategy. Well, the way we're going to get there is we're going to buy two mid-sized firms, one for their technological capability, one for their geographic range. Okay, how are you going to pick the firms? Part of it's what they do and where they are and their financials and all that. But you should probably pick a firm where the leaders of the firm are more likely to get you those results. And by the leaders, I don't just mean the executive leadership team. Usually the investor gets to know the leadership team pretty well, right? They're the people they're going to deal with. They might even conduct some sort of psychological assessment of the managing partner and his or her direct reports. But once the ink dries, once the money changes hands, it's then incumbent on that leadership team to convey what's necessary to the line partners. And the line partners are the
Mm,
revenue engine of the firm. They're the people that are in the market. They're the ones who have client relationships that they can expand. They're the ones who have networks. So that's where the opportunity really is how do you what do you do to help those line partners who may be financial beneficiaries of the deal but didn't have anything to do with constructing it and are now faced with some major change in their job. At the very least, their numbers are going up, right? The performance requirements are being increased. But
mm,
beyond that, as we said during this conversation, they may be asked to learn about new practices. They may be asked to introduce new practices or new people they don't know into their long-standing relationships, right? You've been my client for 20 years. I guard our relationship very closely. We've known each other for ages. What's it going to take for me to introduce new partner A who just came into the firm? I don't know them from, I don't even understand what they do. I think they're going to screw up a relationship. So I need to become much more comfortable making the introduction. I also need to become very facile in what they do so that I can ask you questions to determine if the services that this person's offering are right for you. So it sort of comes back full circle to, a good advisor is going to ask a lot of questions to understand how they can be most helpful to you. And so if I know your business well enough, I may come to you and say, we just bought this firm in Cincinnati. I'm on a Midwest run today, right? So we just bought a firm in Cincinnati, and my partner Jay is a really impressive expert, very experienced in your industry, or really understands forensic accounting or AI or pick whatever. I would love to make that introduction. Okay, you and I have a trusted relationship, so you're going to trust me to do that. I need to back that trust up because I'm not just introducing because somebody said so. I'm introducing you because I think you can make a difference. And that works well, but it's worth knowing who of your partners are going to struggle to do what I just described and who's going to take to it more naturally. And start with the ones that take to it more naturally, get some wins on the board, have them learn
mm.
and demonstrate that this is possible, that it's beneficial, and then start working on the rest of the partnership group.
Your clients that you've been partnered with in this endeavor, what's the feedback that they've given your team from the process, from leadership, Kinavic Leadership Acceleration process, right? Leveraging tools like Verity, based on all that data. Like, what's the fruit? What's the feedback that you've gotten from your clients, from your partners, the difference that it makes in whether it's their investments or whether it's their
Well,
firms?
it's interesting because sort of it's bottoms up. The people that we work with, the partners whose performance we help accelerate, are over the moon. The comments you get are like, I mean, there's anything from being appreciative of their firm, making the investment, to realizations and of things about themselves that they didn't know, or an understanding of how to apply who they are to the job at hand. So it's interesting. I mean, usually, if you've been around long enough and you're senior enough, you've gone through some form of what we call psychometric assessment. You've taken a leadership test of some sort. Now, that's all well and good, but typically what happens is you then get a report. Somebody gives you a report, you read it. On a good day, somebody reads it to you. And that's sort of about it. We go very deep on the readout and then connecting the results of the assessment to what your goals are. That ends up being the difference. So we then say, okay, given who you are and what you're being asked to do, let's come up with a plan for your success. And that's the difference. Leadership coaches will help you in a lot of different ways. Performance coaches help you succeed. That's our goal. We're not trying to help you be a better person. We hope you are. But in 6 months' time, our goal is to help you be as successful as possible in your new role. So we're going to figure out what the job is, what the goals are, and build a very specific plan to help get you there. And then we're going to work with you every 2 weeks to see how it's going, to course correct, to get you help, et cetera.
What relation do you think that going that extra mile with the plan has with their engagement in in their career, their company, the company's purpose? Being engaged
It's
in
it's
that process versus disengaged.
it's tremendous, right? It's no longer an HR exercise. You're not just getting this report with a bunch of psychological premises, but you're actually having somebody help you succeed, right? This is straight up coaching like in a sport. If you go take a golf lesson, I mean, you can watch YouTube videos all day long, and you can read magazines, and you can watch TV, or you can go work with someone who actually helps you with your swing, helps you with your putting. Now, not to overdraw the golf analogy, but then if the instructor who you're working with actually goes on a golf course with you, plays a few holes with you, it'll make that
Yeah.
much more of a difference because it is so much more relevant and it is so much more in context because you're actually doing the job and having somebody providing you feedback in the moment and helping you do better in the areas where you have gaps and showing you how you can use your strengths to be more successful.
I think this is unbelievable, and this is why. Anecdotally, I'd like your thoughts on this. Correct me if I'm missing something as well, but in my experience, that new attorney, like 3 years out of college, 4 years out of college, 7, 6 years, like was the old way that they're like really they're really working. They're like there are some their lifestyle, whether it's the attorney or the accountant, someone in the professional services. Was it in the old days, they're really putting in the hours. Today, is that changing? Like where that culture is changing? And because anecdotally, my experience, I've observed that it seems to be, but I don't have the data sets that
Mhm.
you have or that. So is that the culture? Is it changing? And then of course, right in that labor relations sense, it's like, what role does society play on how
Mhm.
companies, right? Because you said labor history, labor economics, like what
Mhm.
role does, so there's two parts, like what role does the society play in how the career pathing even works? So part one is that changing how each individual looks at their career versus like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and
I think it is. I mean, so my data points are my kids are in their 20s, and I do a little guest lecturing at my alma mater, and the students are much, well, not even, they're not equally bright. They're brighter. They're brighter than we were. There's no doubt. But their views on work life are very different. I came out of school in the 80s, right? It was, you know, badge of honor to see how much you worked. I worked in New York City, usually was in the office till 9, 10 o'clock at night, car service home, get up, do it again. It was expected that if you had a quote unquote good job, you're working 70, 80 hours a week. That's still the case, I think, in investment banking and in some fields. I think in consulting, they're still working a lot. It's not, they're not working that much. It's healthier, by the way, to not work 70, 80, 90 hours a week. Um, you also have better
yeah.
tools at your disposal, right? Part of why we worked as hard as we did is, I mean, if I was doing this when I was a compensation consultant, if I was building a peer group for executive pay, I would need to actually identify companies that were good comparators, research and acquire the proxies, the written paper proxies from these companies, the little sheets, we order them, they come in via FedEx or via courier, and then you have to analyze this data, right? So I'm like reading the proxy with a highlighter and
Wow.
making
Wow.
notes and then putting that into a spreadsheet. It just took longer, right? I mean, right now, if I want to build for executive pay and pull the data that I would have put in my spreadsheet before, I mean, that might take 6 to 10 minutes. I mean, it takes more expertise to then pressure test it, but the initial research, which is where a lot of the entry level hours go, the quote unquote grunt work, is facilitated by technology. Now, that may mean you need fewer people doing the grunt work. I think people still need to learn the process, and that's what we were talking about before. We still have to build consultants, but the way the work is done, the nature of entry level work, and the intensity of that work, I think, has dramatically changed. And it's not just society, it's not just technology, it's both.
What relationship do you think the work has with the values, development of core values?
Well, I think that a lot of that, I mean, your core values are, I think people, show up to work with the values that they have and back to alignment are most successful if they join an organization that shares those values.
Hmm.
Now, organizations will publicize their values. They will talk about what's important. We're a roll up your sleeves culture, or we're at an inquisitive culture, et cetera. Those markers are interesting. The question then becomes, Do they, how they actually demonstrate those values, and do they actually hire people with those values? We believe that psychometrically we can identify the traits that are going to make someone successful and aligned in a particular culture.
So you're identifying and then you're facilitating the integration. And that's led to this. You're saying that people actually are saying, hey, this has impacted my life on a deep level.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you've worked with different organizations, I mean, I look around and if I look at the clients I've worked with over many, many years and the firms I've worked for, I have felt more or less engaged, more or less aligned, more or less sort of in the zone in different organizations. Not saying they're one's better than the other, but there are some organizations that operate in a way that is more natural to me. Now, as a consultant, you learn to work in all sorts of different organizations, but if you're going to go into the same job every day and the values are misaligned or the role is misaligned, um, it's going to be hard to pull off, right? So if you're in a business development, if your role is a business development role and you are not particularly comfortable meeting new people, doesn't mean you can't do it, but it's going to be a lot harder.
You did a video on LinkedIn about there are those people that get things done and organizations can, elevate them or unintentionally suppress. That's how I interpreted
Mhm.
that video.
Mhm.
How could our listeners, the organizations be not be getting the most out of those people or it was like untapped talent, untapped
Yeah.
potential. You were
Yeah. I mean,
elucidating
so in
on.
professional services, what we call A players have disproportionate impact, right? I mean, let's take as an article of faith that most of the partners that you hire, if not all of them, are capable, have good track records, know what they're doing. But then what we find is if, a couple of years in, a third of them are failing. They're not meeting the objectives that you had for them. They didn't suddenly get worse at what they do. We, and some of them, by the way, hit the ground running immediately, probably because of their alignment with the way the organization works, maybe the right kind of sponsorship, a little bit of luck, they get on the right project and it takes off. And so they become the A players, they become the go-tos. If something new opportunity comes in or something difficult comes up or we need to do something really important, we've got a short list of people that we go to every time. See, I've seen this in many, many firms. Our contention is that the short list doesn't need to. Our contention is that you hired people with a lot of talent, and understanding the underpinnings of those talents and how to better deploy those talents is something not enough firms do. So I'm not saying you're going to I'm not saying every one of your partners is suddenly going to become a go-to person, an A player. But if you have 10 partners, just making this up, and four are the ones you always go to, what if you could go to six? I bet you can go to six. And that's 50% more go-to partners, right? That is increasing your capability, your capacity to take on difficult engagements, challenges, be they managerial or otherwise. And you might not realize the potential the person has if you don't look inside, right? We talk about the visible and invisible all the time. Well, Jay's doing fine, but there's something about him. He just doesn't seem to have, he isn't able to connect with the team, or he isn't, when he gets in front of a group, he doesn't make as much sense as we wish he did. Well, why is that? If you looked at the invisible and understood what it was that Jay brings to the table, right? Where his strengths are and what to leverage, and how to close the gaps. Jay goes from being a B and not just, from being a B to being an A. And now you've got six A's instead of four A's.
Finally, somebody said it. We're live. This is good. You're very generous with that.
Yeah, you notice I didn't bring myself into it.
I Yeah, Nietzsche said invisible threads are the strongest ties. So I
Mhm.
love the theme.
Yeah.
What about output? So let's say that's that scenario, four partners, but there are two that could have taken on more work. What type of economic output could that create for a law firm, an accounting firm, a consulting firm? Like what kind of actual change or economic output and that could come from that type of performance increase? It's hard to ask arbitrary numbers, but like, do you have something you could share like the from a result standpoint?
I think it's going to depend very much on the nature of the firm and the practice, et cetera. But and it's not just raw business development, for example. Sometimes it's things like innovation, right? Sometimes it's things like new market entry. So it is more people accomplishing more significant objectives. We always fall back on revenue because that's the easiest one to track. But you know what? It's also a lagging measure. So if you look at, an
Ah, I
engaged
love that.
partner who's able to, especially in this age where the business is changing so much, what if you had another leader? What if you had another person figuring out a new way to do things and bringing people with them? So instead of four people carrying that burden, you had six, and they see it as an opportunity. You grow that much more. It becomes a more engaging place to work. Your clients benefit from better thinking because there's more better thinkers available, and let alone what it does for your teams.
It's an amazing. So I was watching a podcast called Invest with the Best, had never seen it before. There was a gentleman, a co-founder of a investment firm called Sixth Street, is Mr. Waxman,
Mhm.
talking about how he was a Goldman guy and early in his career, in his early 20s, he had this idea. He brought it to his superior. He honored him by listening and brought him to face the board or the management
Mhm.
team, and they liked it. And he was on this podcast all these years later as co-founder of one of the most successful investment firms, saying it transformed it. It changed it made him feel like he had a voice. He mattered. Anyway, he went on to become this
Mhm.
unbelievably successful investor. And the company, the Goldman Sachs, still, I think it's like a $50 billion
Mhm.
market segment. It was something to do with like fixed, it was something to do with investing in the middle market, so, in some
Mhm.
instruments. So that's just like, I was like, whoa, what a great example of the mentor-mentee interaction and the
Mhm.
organization pulling them up. And you said innovation and market penetration. That's what I think is an example of that I was like totally struck by from a culture standpoint that happened there at that firm. I'm curious your thoughts on if I'm connecting on that.
Well, yeah, and what you see anymore is the barriers to entry are pretty low in professional services. Three hardworking, smart people with an idea and an internet connection can do a lot. So that changes the game for the big firms. I mean, so the three-person firm is going to have a hard time competing with a 750 person, 50 person, much less 750,000 person firm. But they can still incubate ideas, right? So what starts to happen, and this is back to the private equity thing, and not even private equity, but just straight out mergers and acquisitions. If you look at the largest professional services firms, if you look at Accenture, if you look at Deloitte, they'll acquire 20, 30 companies every year. People don't talk about it as much because they're small acquisitions. They'll buy our 20-person firm because you and I have come up with a new methodology, because you and I have a new technology, because you and I have owned the market in, geez, I don't know, pick a specialty in a country in Peru. Say we have built the best organization effectiveness consultancy in Peru. Okay, maybe one of these firms wanted to get into Peru, or they're in Peru and they're like, oh, that'd be a good adjacency. We should do this. Or, we're performance improvement consultants in Australia in the mining industry. Whatever it is, we can scale pretty well in this environment, right?
Hmm.
It's not 30 or 40 years ago, the first thing you thought about is like, well, I got to rent an office. I need telephones. I need secretaries. I need paper. Like, you don't need any of this, right? So we're able to just incubate the idea. And what starts to happen is the larger firms go like, wow, we're not going to figure everything out all the time, always first. So they're also always looking for, okay, who's got a leg up? Let's just acquire them.
How about for our listeners that are in that 10, 20, 30, the accounting, the firms, the consultants, the lawyers, um, if they want to go proactively to these larger institutions, is that a potential partner for Kinavic Leadership Acceleration? So our listeners, we have them. They have 20 lawyers or the 30 accountants. They want to proactively shop their business, they would partner with a firm like yourselves to prepare for that
I think we'd love
from
to
a
talk.
human
I mean,
capital standpoint?
we can make introductions for sure. I mean, there are firms that that's their business is putting these deals together. There are people who go online that are matchmakers. But the more organic process is I made an introduction the other day for a friend of mine who runs a financial services valuation firm. Introduced him to
Yep.
somebody who might introduce him to somebody else. I mean, this is sort of the ebb and flow of business, right? I mean,
Yep.
this is the job that AI is not going to take.
I
Relationship
want
building,
to
personal
it
introduction.
it in that spirit, you did a post on strategy, like and what not to do and how important it is. And the example used was about the strategy versus the tech, like those at the top that are in leadership. Like, what's that? What do you mean by it's as important to know what not to do than what to focus on? What
Yeah,
did you?
that's probably a riff on Michael Porter, right? So Porter would say that the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. And strategy fundamentally is making choices. And what I've learned over the years is the choices of what not to do are as, if not more important as the choices of what to do. And that's not to say you choose nothing, but if you choose too many things, you have chosen nothing. Pick your lane, pick the thing that you're really good at, pick the thing where there's market demand and be excellent in that area. And that means saying no to a lot of other good ideas that while they may be good ideas, are not central to what you do. And I'll tell you
Hmm.
an example, frank example is Kinavic, what we do. We have decided very specifically that our focus is professional services firms. We are going to consult to consultants. We're going to advise advisors. I've talked about this before. The reason behind that is that these firms' most important assets and most significant investments are in talent, which is our space. We also pick this area because we have a unique asset, which is the very leadership assessment. So we know what good looks like in professional services. Doesn't mean we can't do other assessing, but we're really, really good at professional services. And we focus at the partner level. And I get this question all the time. People will say, well, why just partners? Why not? Does that mean that nobody else is important? What about managers and senior managers? What about associates? No, look, everyone plays a role. Our focus, and back to our friend Michael Porter, is we choose to focus on the most senior talent because they have a disproportionate impact on the success of their firms, on the growth of their firms. A great partner brings a lot of people with them. A less successful partner can take people down. So again, not to say that there isn't a contribution made everywhere, but if you had to make one bet, we've made it in professional services. If you had to make one bet, we think it needs to be on the most senior talent where you're investing the most money. Look, we are very, very experienced and capable assessors and coachers of talent. We do have clients that are outside the space, but our choice regarding what to do affirmatively is to focus in a specific industry where talent's very important at a specific level where impact is disproportionately high.
Why is the impact partner so where does the impact that the partner makes downstream? Where does that come from that it's of such high importance in your view?
Well, there are a number of factors, right? So number one, I'll, I guess, disagree with myself from previously. Business development. So firms run on growth. Partners are the economic engine of the firm. So a successful partner will generate new engagements, new relationships, not just more money, but more clients. They'll generate more work. That's what the firms exist to do. If there isn't work, then you don't have a firm. Then you have to start looking at am I the right size? Do I need to let go of talent because there isn't enough work to go around? So partners are disproportionately important in growth because they're the economic engine. They're disproportionately important in solution development because of their expertise and because they're on the front lines working with clients and figuring out what problems are most important to the clients, defining the problem to be solved. They're also most important in developing talent because they're the ones leading the engagements, they're the ones setting the tone, they're the ones who, one way or another serve as the mentors and the teachers of the generation behind them.
Hmm. Juan Pablo Gonzalez, I could talk to you all day about this. We'll have to have you back again. I'm so excited to learn and continue to develop this understanding of this great work that Kinavic Leadership Acceleration is doing in this much needed sector, right? These are the helping professions that influence untold amount of people in all right. They're your clients is
Mhm.
essentially
Yep.
everybody. If the listeners have not listened to episode 826 of the Culture Matters podcast, our previous episode, I challenge you to go listen to that. Very different conversation. And Juan Pablo Gonzalez, where can people connect with you on LinkedIn? They want to get to know you on a deeper level and potentially partner with Kinavic.
So the easiest way, and thanks, Jay, the easiest way is www.kinavic, which is KINAVIC.com. And you'll be able to find me on LinkedIn through that. I have a very common last name. Googling Juan Pablo Gonzalez is going to get you a very long list. So as much as I'd like you to look for me on LinkedIn, and I do, I'm a lot harder to find. But Kinavic, we're not aware of any other firm that's known as Kinavic. So if you go to there, you'll find a link and you'll find us.
Oh man, I need to ask this. What's the Kinavic? Where's that come from? What does it mean? Is there an etymology or a morphology there, or is something?
Well, so it is like so many things. I made a word that we developed, let's just say. So Verizon wasn't a word before Verizon developed it. Accenture wasn't a word. The provenance of it is the KIN. The kin is from motion, and the avic is navigation. So the thought behind it is, this is this whole idea of helping people perform. It's a motion, right? We're going to help you knowledgeably perform better and stay in motion.
I love it.
Okay.
Culture. Hey, thanks for coming back to the show. If you're listening, share this with someone that you know needs to listen to this. Please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much, Juan Pablo Gonzalez.
Jay, such a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me back, and I look forward to the next conversation.